So this is the first student podcast on the relationships cluster, focused on the poem Sister Maude, page 62 of the anthology.
So, some background and context about the poem. The poet is Christina Rossetti, and she was born in London in 1830. She comes from a famous literary and artistic family. Her father was an Italian poet, and her brother, Dante Gabriel Rossetti, was a famous pre-Raphaelite painter. Sister Maude explores the ideas of a ballad popular in Victorian times from the point of view of one of the main protagonists, and it's written in ballad form as well. So, should we start off with the first stanza? So, I think the first thing that you notice in the first stanza is we've got, who told my mother of my shame, who told my father of my dear. So we've got the repetition of told. So that could possibly highlight the sister, Maude's, crime, because we've got that repetition, the accusatory tone.
Yeah, it sounds quite aggressive.
Yeah.
And the repetition of to, almost emphasising the need to find a person.
Yeah.
That someone will be accountable.
Yeah. Yeah. And then next two lines, oh but Maude, my sister Maude, who lurked to spy and peer. So this is our first introduction of the sister, and we've got the repetition of the name again, and I think repetition's quite a common theme that runs throughout. Yeah. And the clarification of my sister, so the clarification of the relationship.
I think we could talk about there as well, the idea of my sister, the idea of possession as well.
Yeah.
That perhaps they should be closer than maybe they are at the moment.
Yeah. Is it a normal sister relationship? Yeah. And then the use of these words spy and peer, again, it's a kind of, they mean the same thing. So it's kind of reinforcing
intimidation, intruding on her space, and the idea of lurked. She had a vested interest in it. Why was she doing it?
Yeah. Why? So the next stanza then, we start to understand what exactly has happened, what her sister's actually done. Cold he lies, as cold as stone, with his clotted curls about his face, the comeliest corpse in all the world, and worthy of a queen's embrace. So I think the first thing you notice there is this alliteration of the C, the plosive alliteration of the C sound.
And do you think that reflects the anger, the sort of spitting it out, the aggression?
Yeah.
And also, actually, when you read that, it's quite hard to say, as if it's hard for her to get these words out.
Yeah. Maybe hard for her to accept. I think that repetition of cold also maybe reflects the coldness of the crime and
and the treatment towards him.
Yeah. Just put that there. Anything else about that stanza then?
I quite like the sort of imagery of the clotted curls about his face.
Yeah.
Almost perhaps quite angelic, like sort of framing him.
Yeah, definitely. So, angelic framing. And
describing a corpse as comeliest, the idea that even in death there's a wanting there, there's a commitment to him, and also maybe the hyperbole of the comeliest corpse in all the world. That,
and I think that perhaps makes us start to question the narrative, the speaker's voice there, because how rational is she?
Yeah.
It's
it sounds a bit too sort of far-fetched, doesn't it? A bit too like intense.
Yeah.
Maybe even unhealthy intense.
So we're being made to believe that the criminal so far is a Sister Maude, but we're starting to get clues about the psyche perhaps of the speaker. You might have spared his soul, sister, have spared my soul, your own soul too. So we've got contrasting with this plosive alliteration, we've got sibilance of the S sounds, and that the effect of that is kind of hissing.
Anger again.
Yeah. So anger shown in two very different types of alliteration. I noticed the possessive pronouns, so his, my, and your, and I felt like that kind of brought out a triangle, like a love triangle.
Yeah.
And then again, that the pronouns in the next two lines.
I had not been born at all. He'd never looked at you.
So
jealousy.
Again, yeah.
And it implies wrongdoing, doesn't it? That he'd never have looked at you. Almost that he's sort of innocent here.
Yeah. Running out of room a little bit. The next stanza, my father may sleep in paradise, my mother at heaven gate, but Sister Maude shall get no sleep, either early or late. So we've now been told that mum and dad are dead. So you're wondering, why they're dead? Because...
And why aren't the two sisters united in that death, which would normally be the case? But is there an implication there that the parents are innocent, though, here, because it's paradise and heaven?
Yeah. Paradise. Positive connotations.
I think there we could look at the but.
Yeah.
I think that's quite interesting. So the idea that father's asleep in paradise, mother's at heaven, but sister will get no sleep. There's a certainty to that.
Yeah.
Again, implying the isolation of the sister here. We're still not entirely clear why.
Yeah. So, should we go into the final stanza?
Yeah.
My father may wear a golden gown, my mother a crown may win. So I think here the gown and the crown, the rhyme there, internal rhyme, again brings a kind of togetherness to the mother and the father. And they both, those two garments have kind of rich
authority.
If my dear and I knocked at heaven gate, perhaps they'd let us in. So again, uniting those two, my dear and I. These two are united, these two are united. But Sister Maude, bide you with death and sin. So she's alone there. And that emphasis on you with the italics.
And no longer using a name at that point.
Yeah.
That sort of depersonalisation, maybe.
Yeah.
And also those words, those choices of death and sin compared to paradise and heaven in the previous, so the kind of theme of religion and religious language that maybe tries to validate her feelings.
Yeah. So now that we've kind of annotated the poem, we could start to think about some of the form perhaps and the way that it's laid out and the rhythm. So if we have a box down here and we think about form, so there are 5 stanzas, 4 4-line stanzas and then a final 5-line stanza.
Yeah. I'm just looking for a rhyme scheme. We've got shame, dear Maude, Pierre. So we've got
A, B,
C, B.
Yeah.
A, B, C, B.
In terms of rhythm, it's mostly tetrameter with the occasional line that has 3 stresses, but their stresses are quite pronounced. And I think the stresses are really purposeful.
And are about the anger and the resentment.
And I think it's quite significant that the final stanza has that one extra line because it breaks the rhythm and it means that our attention is drawn to this final line, which is almost like a condemnation, isn't it?
I think structurally as well, I wonder if we could make something of the fact that nearly all the verses, apart from the second one, start with a pronoun. So it's who told, you might, my father, my father. It just conveys that theme of relationships. And also, I think maybe the ambiguity, because who are these people and and what has happened? It creates that mystery.
Yeah, and it's like the speaker is kind of behaving as though she's letting us in on this great secret, but actually there's very little that we actually know.
Actually do know.
Yeah.
And how reliable is she?
So sense of mystery. Okay.
So we were also going to kind of pull together a few key points and maybe think about poems that it would compare to, because obviously a third of the mark is comparison. So we've obviously got the idea of relationships, but perhaps different to some of the poems because we've got sort of family relationships, although a romantic relationship is obviously referred to.
Secondary, isn't it?
We could link it to other poems along a theme of sort of anger and resentment, mistrust.
Yeah.
Which we see in other poems in the cluster. It could be linked structurally for sort of the regularity of it, the rhyme scheme, the verses, the stanzas, the kind of overall structure.
Yeah, and also we quite often have this regular structure in poems where actually the speaker is kind of unhinged. Like sometimes the unhinged speaker it's shown by the form, and sometimes it's actually the opposite. And why would the poet structure a poem so kind of rigidly when actually we can tell that the speaker is a little bit, and the subject matter.
But I wonder if that's about the power and control of it.
Yeah.
Like it is in the Last Duchess and so on, that idea of a controlling person who's controlling others.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything else you want to add?
Possibly just the fact that it's important to note that we've got unanswered questions.
Yeah.
The authority that the speaker assumes contrasts with the fact that how little we know about what's happened, and the idea that both characters are acting sinfully. So yes, fair enough, the sister did do whatever it was that she did, but then we get the impression that actually, we've got this condemnation of so though she wants to see the speaker sees herself as without sin, the whole fact that she's condemning her sister to hell or whatever it is sort of shows that actually neither are without sin.